Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast, episode 136. My name is Yvonne, and I will be hosting the podcast once again this week. In regards to Steve, thank you all for your concerns and well wishes. He is feeling better every day and is planning to return to the podcast in the near future. This episode, we will have a similar format to the last episode of the podcast, but this time the review will be on the strokes. We will review the serve, the forehand, the volley, the backhand, the overhead, the one-handed underspin backhand, and the return of serve, in that order. So I'll have Steve and Andy Fitzell take it away with talking about the serve on episode number 8.
We are going to cover different strokes, but this is the first one, probably the most important shot in tennis, the serve. But yeah, we'll go through some other strokes as we go along here. But tonight, the serve.
Also, Vic Braden, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah.
Vic passed away.
Yeah.
And those of our listeners certainly know that we mention Vic's name every day.
Yeah.
I'll tell a story about Vic related to the serve. I was working for him in Southern California, and Gene Austin called him up in his office. And one of my jobs was to put slides in a carousel back in those days. And Gene was asking what Vic thought of Tracy having Roy Emerson as a coach. Of course, Vic gave Roy a great recommendation. But then after the phone call, I remember Vic saying, "I wish I knew this when I was teaching Tracy the serve." And it's really how the loop is formulated.
Yeah.
And we'll go through that.
Yeah.
But one thing with the serve, the term serve comes from the garden days of tennis, when tennis was a garden party.
Yeah.
And the servant put the ball in play from the side of the court. But for some of us, unfortunately, we have to serve the ball ourselves. But as you said, it's the most important shot. It's the first shot. Sometimes it's the only shot. And you're really looking for three positives. One is an ace. The next is a service winner. And the next is to have your opponent hit a weak return.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a story. Brian Wilson, he worked with one of our former students, Craig Tiley, at the University of Illinois. So Brian was sent to work with us a number of occasions. So he was at our place, and then he left. And one of the juniors told us that he beat Karlovic 7-6, 7-6.
Of course.
I actually had to tell the story correctly. Is that someone said Brian Wilson beat Karlovic, and then someone in the back of the band guessed it must have been 6-6.
Yeah.
I think Ryler DeHart and Jeremy Wertzman. I would bet dollars to donuts that both of them beat Isner. Whether it was in college tennis or where they first started playing futures, entry-level pro tournaments. But I do remember anybody that we've had that beat Isner 6-6.
Couple tiebreakers. Yeah, I'll have to look that up.
The big guy serving, Riley Opelka, he's a man now, but when he was a boy, he had just won Junior Wimbledon. And my son Connor, he won. I can't remember what the score was, but Riley Opelka hit 24 aces, which 24 is a magic number. That's actually the number of points you have to win a set.
Yeah.
But with our students, share with the listeners, the first thing we do is we film a player.
Yeah.
And if they're at a higher level, stage development, we don't do this with a beginner, but we film from 3 angles. If it's a second serve, what we don't do with a beginner is we just film their serve. But if it is a more advanced player, we film first and second.
Yeah.
So then we analyze it. We make a narrated slow motion analysis, and then we have to go to work. We use Don Leary's word picture method, but we combine all these other tennis teachers with his idea of the word picture method.
Yeah.
If our listeners would go to YouTube and put 2 words together, Tennis Smith, and just put Tennis Smith word picture method, you'll see half dozen kids going through images for the serve. Like, for example, Victor Lillo, who won the Orange Bowl and won the La Petite, he trained with us for 5 years. Mm-hmm. He's on that. Jim Morgan, a teaching pro in Dallas, he went through our methodologies, and his daughter plays college tennis. She's in the snow, Boise, Idaho, going through where they used to live, going through the word picture method. I tell the young players to make a poster, a list of the images.
Yeah.
So, a hammer grip is when you have all your fingers bunched together. I mean, Pancho Gonzalez, as great as his serve was, he had a hammer grip. Mm-hmm. But, you want to spread your fingers out, especially the index finger.
Yeah.
So we tell people, tap the racket like a hammer. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you're going to have handcuffs, like put your hands like a baseball player taking a ball out of the glove. You're standing on a skateboard. Dennis Vandermeer, all these ideas, I'd like to tell people where they came from, is he used to have 2 bathroom scales on the court. Put all your weight on the front foot, and then you transfer your weight back. Mm-hmm. And the term unloading. So we have these kids go skateboard, bathroom scale 1, bathroom scale 2. Yeah. And as we have as many images as there are letters in the alphabet.
Yeah. Always adding too. I mean, finding more creative ways to
yeah. So for example, we used to say like a third base position in baseball, but kids don't play baseball so much. So now we say the cobra position.
Yeah.
And it's not that complicated, but you have the kids go through it slowly and they do it in a logical sequential order. Now they have to just say, okay, what do they do with their right hand? What do they do with their left side? Well, you hang onto the ball like a glass of water.
Yeah.
Now the details, actually, if you turn your hand in more like this, your arm is looser.
Right.
It actually helps you with your toss. The toss, the radial point, the wrist can take the ball everywhere.
Yeah. Just for the listeners at home, if you hold your left hand, if you're a right-handed player, if you hold your tossing hand up with your palm facing the sky, your arm's going to be a little tight and it's tougher to rotate. And then the tendency is to toss it over your head. So if you hold it more with your palm down, although it's weird for most people, glass of water, you'll keep your arm loose.
Yeah, we tell people hang on to the ball like a glass of water. Keep the ball in your hand to shoulder level. You make a letter J. If you're right-handed, you're taking the toss, first serve out to a giant clock, 1 o'clock. Gary Alpert, a teaching pro in Cincinnati, his son came to a camp one time, and he's the one who said, just pretend you're taking a piece of bread and you're feeding a giraffe.
Yeah.
Because you do want to go slow with the toss going upward.
Yeah.
With the motion with the right hand, the cobra, then as the shoulder goes forward, it's the comb the hair action, the salute position. Now, you can't see with you and I how the racket, the kids will say, clears the shelf.
Yeah.
It goes about 5 feet for a great serve at that horizontal plane.
Yeah, centrifugal force takes it away from your back.
Yeah, so it's scratch your friend's back.
Yep.
We'll talk about some myths here in a minute. Scratch the back is a myth. With how your arm's at a 90-degree angle, where, listen to Seashell, talk on the telephone, but how you put your hand in this position, throw the football.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they can slowly go through it. So after they go through the word picture method, we ask parents, is your child doing exactly this? Because people will come in and they'll have a video made, they'll fly, get off the airplane, their parents were in a car, they check into a hotel, and it's okay, this is how you're going to rebuild your serve.
Yeah.
You tell the parents to put up mirrors, in the garage or the playroom, wherever they have space. So they have the list, the poster, the chart, and then they need to hang a string from the ceiling.
Yeah.
And the string comes right down to their impact point.
Yeah.
Because you're better off to program the swing. I always ask people what's more important, the swing or the toss, and they'll say the toss, but no, the swing's more important.
Yeah.
The riddle, does the racket find the toss, does the toss find the racket? That's where Bobby Riggs would play people for money and say, I'll wear a blindfold every other game.
Exactly.
Because he could serve with his eyes closed.
Yeah, program your swing and then toss to your swing.
Then you set up mirrors, and ideally it's better not just to have mirrors on one side. So you can be pretty elaborate putting mirrors up, but fair enough if you just put them in front of you.
Yeah.
Foam balls, ping pong paddles. So, if people go, yes, 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 okay, we've watched the tape 3 times, we've sent notes, we have it in writing where, okay, here's the word picture method.
Yeah.
And, some people, we had people just ridicule, that's wrong, that's just too much, that's crazy. We do it all the time. Have people learn with their opposite hand, and they have to really, really process.
Yeah.
So to make it efficient. One basic that's agreed upon is the throwing motion. I mentioned in one of the podcasts about the movie The Little Mo, where she's throwing the racket, Maureen Conley. There's documentaries on the Williamses, and generally you'll see where both girls are throwing the racket like a baseball. I know on your Instagram, I saw where you put one of those up as an example, a young girl throwing the racket and springing after it.
Yeah, I've had that up a couple times. One of them we had when Mackie McDonald was out here with us. I had him and George Goldoff doing that in the grass. The one with the girl, was on the cement. You got to do it with a broken old racket. So people were kind of not ridiculing, but they were concerned about the racket. But you got to do it with broken rackets. But it's one of the best drills you can do. Just get out there and throw. And there is a great footage of Venus and Serena, who arguably have two of the best serves of all time in women's tennis, doing that drill.
To digress, young girl, she's well taught by Cole Reeves, young girl from Arkansas. Alanis Hamilton. She won the 14s Southern sectionals. I don't think it was really a full draw because of the pandemic, but it's, you got to thrive on criticism, not compliments. So somebody on Instagram, she was throwing the racket and the comment was, "Where's the sprint?"
Oh yeah, throw and sprint. And to her defense, it was, she'd been doing the drill for 15 minutes or so. She was pooped out. Yeah. But yeah, she's working on the legs.
Here's something that every kid should have in their bag. You take an old tube sock, a baseball sock, you put 3 balls in it. It's a baseball trick.
Yep.
Baseball coaches do it with a baseball. And if your palm turns up, the balls in the sock come back and hit you in the head.
Instant feedback.
And again, you could loosen your shoulder up. But a lot of times people do it incorrectly.
Welcome back from episode number 8. If you would like to watch the full episode on the serve, or any episode we reviewed today, please look up the corresponding episode on any platform that you would normally listen to podcasts. We will now continue on to episode number 11, where Steve and Andy talk about the forehand.
The forehand ground stroke. There's not much on the forehand ground stroke. When you Google, let's say, modern forehand, not much comes up, huh?
I think you once said 20,000 choices for the modern forehand and less than 20 for the modern backhand.
What I want to know is, when is the modern forehand going to be? Actually, they've already changed this. I've seen this before. It's next gen. The next gen forehand. Next gen physics.
The forehand has definitely changed. That's one thing between old school, new school. With years ago with 3 of the Grand Slams on grass, players playing with wooden rackets.
Right.
By the second week, at the Grand Slams, the players be wearing spikes. So they didn't want to let the ball bounce. Yeah. I always talk about Welby Van Horn, how he's so great with teaching beginners, his body balance positions. And he used the term beginner's grip and championship grip. Mm-hmm. So when players were, done with the 14s, so they're 15 years old, he would change them. Going to Charlie Hollis, Laver's coach, it wasn't a true continental grip, but close to a continental grip.
Yeah.
Or composite made of 2 parts. The base knuckle will be on the top of the third panel, towards the second panel, and the heel pad definitely on 3. And when Welby was in his 90s, he lived to be 94. I can remember visiting him in a nursing home, extended care, and watching Federer play. Mm-hmm. And Welby knew that, and that's why he was so good. Same with someone like Vic Braden. I have a film of Vic Braden from the 60s teaching tennis. When you find a way to do something better, you do it better.
Yeah.
The forehand, I think, to go enter the beginner's world. It's like you got your forehead and you got the back of your head. With the backhand, you go with the back of your hand, your knuckles. It's palm guidance. Yeah. So goes your palm. So goes your forehand. I think when the kids are really, really young, early childhood development classes should really teach a young player 2-handed forehand. I'll say if they're right-handed, you have your right hand on the bottom for every stroke, overhead, serve, 2-handed backhand, 1-handed backhand volley, underspin backhand. The forehand, the right hand's on the bottom. The only shot is you switch. So you're, from a developmental standpoint, you're not hitting cross-handed.
Yeah.
So when the ball goes to the forehand side, then you have to switch. But the reason to have a young player hit a 2-handed forehand is the racket's so heavy. so they can hold the racket higher longer. They can use a conventional grip.
Yeah.
And they end up having a shorter swing. It's amazing how many young players have to switch from a extreme Western grip.
Yeah.
And that's one thing with the transitional balls, that the idea is, well, the ball's going to bounce lower so people won't have an extreme grip. The little kid grip, every ball, if someone is 5 years old, the ball's a waist level ball for an adult is above their head. They go up like this with a Western grip. The racket faces vertical.
Yeah. No, it's a great tip for people out there. If you have a longer swing on your forehand, if you're an adult player, senior player, pro player, you just 2 hands for a little bit. Just as a drill, you can help shorten it up.
Just to go to a backhand, to a backboard and hit a few balls two-handed. With Roger Federer, when he used a tiny tyke, there's film of him hitting two-handed.
Yeah.
Nadal, until he was into the 12s, he was playing 12 and under tennis, and he had a two-handed forehand.
I've heard you say that. It'd be great to see some footage of that.
You have a better chance of developing a one-handed backhand volley by hitting a two-handed backhand volley. You have a better chance of developing a forehand initially. Kevin Curran is amazing as far as change. He got to the NCAA final hitting a two-handed forehand, and he got to the Wimbledon final hitting a one-handed forehand.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. I always think of with palm guidance on the forehand side, really, especially if you have an Eastern grip where the palm is flush with the strings, and you really can use your palm as a guide. So another reason for kids to start out with an Eastern grip is just to really have that feeling of
I'm emphatic about having a kid. We were doing a project with a few 8-year-olds, is to have an Eastern grip. Don't let them slide.
Yeah.
Even though it can be advantageous, the grip determines the angle of the racket face. The angle of the racket face determines the angle of the racket path.
Yeah.
But besides the grip, you're trying to align the wrists, the elbow. And tennis is a sport where you have to play random shots. It's not just forehand ground strokes.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be able to hit the forehand return first. And, then there's a conventional forehand volley. So, the grip, we've shared this before, but we filmed 50 boys and 50 girls at the National 12s. Mm-hmm. It was over 5 years ago now, but over 90% of the players had some version of a Western grip. So that's where the wrist, the grip is Western, the wrist is below the racket, elbow's pointing straight down. It's almost like the racket's hitting their earlobe.
Yeah.
And the contact point is at eye level.
Yeah.
And, Sophia Henin, which one is it? Kenin,
yeah.
Players change. I mean, she's someone 6 years old on the cover of Advantage magazine. James Blake, Vince Spadea, Andre Agassi. You just go on and on. I mean, it seems like almost every player, but they have that passion. They start playing early, mm-hmm. and they don't play with an efficient grip.
Yeah, I mean, with the transition balls, it can help them to get a more manageable contact point. I think that's big. But like you said, they want to get the 2-inch trophy. I guess Vic used to say that all the time. Kids just want to get the 2-inch trophy, and so they go out there and get those crazy grips.
No, winning's confusing. It's totally confusing. When that's where ideally when you start a young player, it'd be better if they were playing multiple sports, learn to be on a team. And actually, when you think about little kid tennis, baseline to baseline, 78 feet away, call it the lollipop, the loop, the high arcing ground stroke, the rainbow, moonball. So Welby Van Horn used to teach the serve last because he didn't want kids to play. The Russian Spartak, 3,000 hours before you play.
Yeah. That's not happening here in America. Or in many places.
With the forehand, years ago, there used to be so many arguments on loop versus straight back. Should you switch grips on volleys? And it seems like today the argument, it doesn't get past the forehand. And actually, it's like there's not that much discussion on any other shot but the forehand.
And it's really just the forehand. Well, now it gets into the ready position, but it's really the forehand follow through. The windshield wiper versus extending out, or all the fancy stuff, forearm pronation and supination and lag and all that kind of stuff.
Well, we have listeners that have followed us for some time, which we appreciate, but new listeners, Jeff Lewis, who I helped as a player way back when he was a teenager, and then as a teacher, I love his video, the forehand spoof.
Yeah, Noah Atala.
Coach Noah Atala. sometimes you watch people explain the forehand and say, well, that'd be okay if you were throwing a discus. They don't think about the next shot. I mean, your center of gravity, you're ending up facing almost the fence behind you. That's definitely the side fence.
Yeah.
And there's research where it takes about 0.8 of a second to get back in the center position. And that equates into eight feet going forward.
Yeah.
So a lot of the top players in the world, because of their forehand, they can't really transition to the net very well.
Yeah.
But they're warriors. They're physical specimens. They're warriors. But again, there's some players that on the pro tour that their forehand, they think it's a liability, but really, as far as being an all-court player, they think it's an asset. I'm sorry, they think it's an asset, but being an all-court player, it's really liability.
Yeah, Vic Braden used to talk about that a lot, where the center of gravity, with an open stance, and also just with over rotation, they had no chance to get to the net.
You're criticized today if you're teaching someone to hit a square, conventional step out forehand.
Yeah.
But if kids are always hitting an open stance, when you finally have them hit off their front foot, they're just too close to the ball. You really should be able to hit a closed stance where you're forced to step across your body diagonally. You have to adjust your back foot. Conventional straight out, semi-open, and open. You need to be able to do the whole thing. But there's too many players on the forehand side that just hit open and semi-open stance forehands.
I can't remember who it was, but I heard someone got to practice with Nadal at the French Open on clay for sure. And it's like, what really stood out? And it was he stepped into every single forehand. So when these guys practice, especially Nadal, I mean, I've been on court level with him several times in the photo pit there filming. And he's trying to step into every single forehand. But then obviously when you play, everything's so dynamic and on the run, and that's not always going to happen. But
I like to think
when he's warming up and practicing, he's stepping into every ball.
I like to think about, where I heard something for the first time. Ron Holmberg was a top 10 player, American player. And he used to hire students that I trained for his tennis camp, Ron Holmberg tennis camp. He used to use the term violent topspin. And I think in Nadal.
Yeah.
I mean, the RPMs, he's definitely swinging up. He definitely understands that in the rally, baseline to baseline, topspin's your best friend.
Yeah.
But also, too, is Nadal, with his grip, he's always tried to come closer to an Eastern grip so he could hit through the court.
Yeah. It's come over for sure.
With, think of Jack Kramer, what he said about Del Potro's Eastern forehand grip. Mm-hmm. He said this to Pam Shriver. It wasn't that many years or that much time before he passed away. He said, Pammy, that's how you hit a forehand, where it's just like a sledgehammer.
Yeah.
Because if you have an Eastern grip, again, if you have a Western grip, when the angle of the racket face is down degree for degree, inch for inch, you have to swing up. So many young junior players, they don't realize they're doing well because they can hit excessive top, but they're hitting short all the time. And really, really little kid tennis. I remember Paul McDonald, a teaching pro in Chicago, who worked for Braden.
Yeah.
Used to say, little kid tennis, if you hit short, it works for you. Because, the kid comes up and they go to the net to lose at a faster rate.
Yeah, exactly.
That clip was from episode number 11, talking about the forehand. Let's continue on to the next clip from episode number 14, the volley. Let's listen in.
Someone comes up to you, you're at a park, you're hitting against a backboard, and they want to ask you to hit, and you go, you want to volley some?
Yeah, exactly.
They don't know. You want to rally when the ball bounces. But a volley, to define it, it's a ball that's hit in the air.
Yeah.
No, for sure, it's a lost art. Why don't you talk a little bit about the momentum source of power for the volley?
Yeah, so one thing we talk about, especially when people talk about power, is that volleys use a momentum source of power. So you get roughly about half the incoming speed of the ball. So if somebody hits 80 miles per hour, you're pretty much going to get about 50% of that just by blocking the ball. But so you get half of your opponent's speed, and then you get about 1.5 times your own racket speed, which isn't a ton on the volley, unless you have a huge swing. And then the other source of power is the body moving forward. So those
speed of the incoming ball and speed of the body going forward.
Yeah.
When people are warming up, it's traditional. But when you're warming up, you're just warming up. You're in a stationary position.
Right.
A lot of positives to players doing 2-on-1s, where you have two players at the net, one at the baseline. Mm-hmm. But a negative is the players at the net are standing there, and they're not going forward.
Yeah. That's so misleading too, I think, for a lot of the listeners, the junior tennis players, especially when they watch the pros warm up, it's just casual, and they're playing a lot of backhand volleys, especially because the other person is hitting right to them. So there's a lot of body shots, and they're just kind of standing in one place. There's not a whole lot of closing in and finishing or really trying to hit the ball deep and stick it. And that can be misleading.
Yeah, the most watched player ever now, Roger Federer.
Yeah.
I love to watch Roger Federer play a match and how much fun he has hitting the ball to the ball kids.
Yeah.
He just wants to, the ball's coming to him. He knows right where the ball kid's going to be.
Yeah.
He just tries to put it right in their hands, and he's having fun with it. He's so relaxed when he plays. But when you watch him warm up,
exactly,
it's not how he plays. With also too, when you're at like say Indian Wells or the U.S. Open, wherever, and you're watching the top players go have a light hit, it's not like you're watching them train.
Yeah. No, I've been lucky enough to be, as you know, on the court with Roger a couple times, and he's always just working on his motor skills. He's playing around with forearm and working on his hands. And but he also said, he said, I'm a difficult person to copy. So it's not that you don't want to try to copy some of the fundamentals of the pros, but just be careful because it can be deceiving.
Yeah. As we've talked about with our podcast, they're interconnected. So one of our guests, Matt Clore, previous guest, I was with him at the U.S. Open, and he's coaching Mackenzie McDonald. So he's going to a practice session.
Right.
And I'm not part of that practice session, but I went to it. So like 5,000 people watching.
Yeah.
Ball goes over Federer's head, backhand side. And it's the shot that they put on the cereal box Wheaties.
Yeah.
It's such a short hitting zone, the high backhand, and he hits a drop shot, angled drop shot, and he kind of looks around like, did anybody see that?
Did you guys see that?
I'm not sure how many people were there could really appreciate it, but I think he surprised himself a little bit with that one.
He's like, that just happened.
But so many types of volleys. A generation before, a lot of the times the pillars that we talk about with our GreatBase curriculum, Vic Bray and Dennis Van and Ripple Jacobson. A generation before was Bill and Chet Murphy. And they both wrote a number of books. But I remember with Chet, and this is true, there's a touch volley, there's a drop volley, angled volley, snap volley, reflex volley, drag volley, cup volley.
Yeah.
We could be out there telling a kid, no excessive hand motion, don't cup the ball.
Yeah.
In that situation, stage development, you really want to be able to teach someone to hit a basic volley.
Yeah.
Rick Macy's obviously had a great deal of success with coaching tennis. He's background similar to Bollettieri, a motivator, and he's taken a lot of kids from one stage to another. But I remember Rick saying with the two-handed backhand volley, the governing body of American tennis used to issue a rule that kids should not be able to hit a two-handed backhand volley.
That's when Patrick McEnroe was heading the show there, right? He has a two-handed backhand.
Yeah,
volley.
Patrick has a two-handed backhand volley, but I was going to a little higher level than Patrick with Pete Sampras. Patrick, when he's a freshman, he played 6 at Stanford. To me, that's a high level. And then he got to the semis of the Australian Open. So just teasing in one hand. But with Sampras, we show that film over and over again, hitting a two-handed backhand volley. We have a better chance of developing a two-handed backhand volley than a one-handed backhand volley.
Yeah, I don't know why that doesn't make sense to people. Yeah,
because you can stabilize the racket. We film kids. They come in, and from California, we just had a young 6th grader here today, and he has a two-handed backhand. So he's got a two-handed backhand return, but he has a one-handed backhand volley. So let's work on a two-handed backhand volley. It's just money. Right away they're going to look at the sidelines. If mom is with him, they're looking right at mom. Mom, doesn't he know? Doesn't he know who I am? I have a one-handed backhand volley.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about grips. Grips on the volley. We are in the vast minority on the forehand side. Why don't you tell our listeners why?
Well, because we're not going to teach a true continental grip, even to an advanced player. And really, I've looked at so many pictures even just recently where you see players, you'll see a backhand volley where they're almost on an Eastern forehand grip. Because on their forehand grip, it's almost an Eastern, so that they can square up the racket, hit it flatter, stick the volley. And then if they're not trained to switch grips to a backhand, they're going to switch their wrist. I was looking at a video. I'll post it one of these days here of Andy Murray Jamie Murray, the doubles player, and he's doing a low backhand volley, and you see, the racket face is open because he's on a composite grip between continental and a forehand, Eastern forehand, and he's coming in, and you just see before impact, his wrist pushes out to make the racket square. It's a low volley, it's about 10 degrees open, and then he sticks it. And but yeah, so we're in the vast minority that we're not going to teach a true continental grip to any really level player, even a high level player, but especially for beginning players, developmental players. You want to use the palm as a guide, and that's where the Eastern grip is going to line up your hand with the strings.
With a continental grip, obviously, we had an episode on tennis math. For the serve and overhead, you want to use a continental grip. Emergency shot, when the ball is behind you, you want to use a continental grip. When it comes down to the math, if you turn the racket 8 times, it goes in full circle, 360 degrees. So you divide 360 by the number of bevels, 8, and you get 45.
Yep.
Jack Kramer. This is in the beginning of Vic Braden's book. Jack Kramer could buy a golf course, build a tennis club, because he knew under pressure that Gonzalez was going to go cross court on the forehand volley.
Yeah.
With, I think Jose Aguirre says it very, very well. It's almost a continental grip. It's the top players will volley with a composite grip.
Yeah.
Say the Bryan brothers. And I know you've been on the court with them.
Yeah.
And I've seen film that you and Vic had with the Bryan brothers.
Yeah, just quickly even go back to Gonzalez. The reason why he knew that is because when he got him on the stretch with a true continental grip, it's almost impossible to hit without a lot of wrist contortion down the line for his volley. So he knew he could, most of the time, just run cross court.
But with a continental grip, it's like some of our listeners are very young, but Johnny McEnroe, because he had a continental grip, he couldn't go way out in front. So he would jump.
Yeah.
He was so good.
Yeah.
And certainly you can contort the wrist, you can raise the elbow more.
Yeah, which he did too. He raised the elbow.
Yeah, so it's not against the rules.
Yeah.
But it sounds so simple. I know that I can remember reading a book written by Bud Collins, late Bud Collins, with Laver, Tennis Digest. And it just made so much sense. Just use one grip. You don't have to change.
Yeah.
And easily 9 out of 10 people are going to tell you volley with a continental grip. Because coaches are creatures of habit, and they teach the way they were taught. Yeah. And research and practice are greatly removed in tennis. There's a disconnect.
Yeah. The time that I was on the court with Mike and Bob, I mean, I grew up with them in the juniors. They were a couple years younger than me. But with Vic, we were able to just film them all day, really just to make sure we could get some volleys, because we had a 10-year project at the Indian Wells tournament there where we filmed on stadium court, but we couldn't set the cameras up to point right at the net. And then also people just don't go to the net. Even, the pros are not going to the net very often. So they agreed to let us come out and just film them so we could capture more volleys. And I asked Bob, I said, show me your grip on your volley, or what grip do you use? And he just put out his hand and he goes, this one. He just said this. And you could see that his knuckle was, not quite on top Eastern, but it was in between the continental. So they may say, a continental grip, but it's not quite a continental grip.
We have a young guest here who plays the saxophone. And if you want to be inspired, go to a concert. If you want to be instructed, go to a teacher. But when it comes down to the very top players, they don't say what they do or do what they say. Someone's at a jazz concert and there's a fantastic player on the saxophone. They're not going to articulate. They're not going to intellectualize how they hit that note.
Yeah.
But also two-stage development is starting a kid to change their grips. The late Dennis Vandermeer, he was so persuasive. What takes more time, to change your grip or not change your grip?
Yeah.
And really, it takes the same amount of time. You just have to be trained.
Welcome back once again. The next stroke we will review will be the backhand. Let's take a listen to Steve and Andy talk about the backhand on episode number 19.
Backhands.
Amazing.
Where to start?
Yeah.
The late, great Vic Braden. I heard someone ask Vic one time, why do you say backhands?
Yeah. Thought about that a lot today.
Backhands.
Backhand?
Brad Gilbert, he's one of my favorite TV commentators, TV personalities. He will say, backhands down the line. Mm-hmm. And Vic's answer was when he ran the pro tour for Jack Kramer, he spent a lot of time with Australians. My take on that is Vic was very, very shy. And it was like a stage voice.
Yeah.
And what a comedian. For backhands down the line.
Yeah. He just used to say, it's easier than saying backhand.
Yeah.
Backhand.
Backhands. I've got some notes here. I tell people that I've learned more on how not to teach tennis than how to teach tennis.
Yeah.
Used to be everyone had a one-hand backhand. There were certainly some exceptions. But in 1952, James Scott Connors. 1954, Chris Everett.
It's her birthday today, I believe.
Happy birthday, Chrissy, 66. Christine Marie Everett.
Not when you're listening to this, but
1954. Then Borg in 56. So now it's just the opposite. It used to be every once in a while you'd see a two-hander on the backhand side.
Yeah.
Backhand side. But the day when people hit one-handed backhands, thumb to thigh to the sky.
I like that one.
Of course, it was a horizontal swing.
No one knew about 19.1 or 19.6 degrees then.
Yes, the dimensions of the court. Here's one for the Texas backhand. Out west, the Cowboys. Pull the gun out of the holster and shoot the man on the balcony.
I like that one.
The British. Pull the sword out of the sheath and say, touche.
Touche.
And this is really reaching, dealing cards. You should go with not the fore part of your hand, the back part of your hand.
Yeah.
Throwing frisbees.
Yep. I think throwing frisbees actually is a good drill if you stop the third link, if you stop the upper body. But I see people throw the frisbee, it's kind of like Tron. They're just letting the body spin like a discus so they don't transfer the energy.
Yeah, but you spend a lot of time in Southern California, those frisbee guys out on the beach.
Oh, yeah, man.
With
Huntington Beach, old HB.
But the evolution of the two-hander, it's here to stay. There was a time in tennis where backhands were better than forehands. One of the things about the modern game is the grip.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago on the bad grass, 3 of the 4 Grand Slams, wooden rackets, everyone was going to the net, and people had continental grips on the forehand side.
Yeah.
It just made sense. One grip.
Yeah. Just roll that baby.
You look at the run-up at Wimbledon, the grass used to wear out, 1, 2, 3 approximately split step. Mm-hmm. Now the grass is not wearing out in that area.
Yeah, not so much.
The equipment's been a factor, but it's just forehands today. Forehands. We teach all our players to play with their opposite hand. They should be able to play. If they're righty, they should be able to play lefty and vice versa. Mm-hmm. Teach all our players to teach. You think about a two-handed backhand. Really young players, I think of Dr. Alex Mayer, teach all young kids to hit two hands on both sides. So not only a two-handed backhand, but teach young kids a two-handed forehand.
Yeah, keep a short, compact swing.
Yeah, then young players, when they hit a two-handed forehand, they have a better chance of having more of a conventional grip. Keep the racket. They have the strength to keep the racket higher, longer. Yeah, and you said that
body and racket working together,
right, in sync. With let's go with grip, swing, body. What do you got?
I was going to just ask quickly. Did you ever consider a one when you first started, or did you have a one? I thought you were a two-hander, right?
I had no backhand.
Yeah,
no, actually,
for sure.
When I played tennis, it's interesting. Knowing nothing about it and actually taking lessons, how I started getting so interested in trying to help tennis teaching and studying other tennis teachers was through hockey. I've mentioned my family, my brother made a career out of studying hockey systems.
Yeah.
But with ice hockey, I started just trying to hit a backhand two-handed, and all of a sudden I could hit a backhand. So I was told it was one grip. So on the forehand side, it had a continental grip. So that's like, death. That's like a wave coming off the ocean with a turn. Mm-hmm. when you play hockey, your top hand is a continental and your bottom hand is an Eastern.
Yeah.
So it's just,
You had it.
well, yeah, then you do everything on that one side. Bjorn Borg, you should say something about when he practiced with the Canadians and they found out he could shoot the puck.
Yeah.
No, that was how I started hitting two-handed backhand. It makes me think of, not to digress, but you have a better chance to learn how to hit a one-handed backhand volley by hitting two-handed backhand volley.
Yeah.
There's a young guy I trained. He won a level 2 12 national title. Ended up playing Division III college tennis. Then I was at a famous academy, and he was on the center court. I was there with 3 Japanese players, and we were there formally. We were paying the academy a fee to observe their program for 3 days. And he was out on this young player's out on the center court, and they were just teaching him to knife the backhand volley.
Yeah.
But coming back to that, when you say if somebody's being taught a two-handed backhand volley, they should be taught right away to practice a one-handed backhand volley. The same logic, if someone has a two-handed backhand, they have to be able to hit a one-handed backhand. I know we're going to have a separate podcast for the one-handed underspin backhand.
Yeah.
But every day, even for a few minutes, we have a couple of coaches visiting here from Seattle, and I was asked the pyograph, how do you do all of this, all these different drills, and it varies, but ideally you want to start with technique, end with technique. Even if it's just 10% in the beginning, 10% at the end.
Yeah.
And so we have people drop hit balls. A lot of times they have them do it left-handed because then they just are really spinning the wheels. And it's been proven if you practice on the left side, if you're a right-handed player and vice versa, it will help your right-handed backhand if you're drop hitting left-handed backhands.
Yeah, you got to really process the information.
Yeah, so we teach people to hit underspin backhands, really little kids from the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
With the grips, the swings, the body positions. That I can remember working with Welby, and I know we're going to talk about the 8 pillars from our course, Tennis Intelligence Applied. Now, in Welby's era, everybody was playing one-handed for the most part.
Right.
But you just take the balance, the body balance for the forehand side and the 3/8 system balance, turn, the checkpoints are the same. Because when you're hitting a two-handed backhand, you're hitting, as a righty, it'd be a left-handed forehand.
Yeah, or two-handed, left-handed forehand.
In 2003, Craig Tiley, he spent 7 years with us. And, he certainly, just like everyone, became very close with Vic, Uncle Vic. But when he went to Illinois, if Vic Braden walked in the room, Vic wouldn't have known who he was. They had certainly met, but I've had a lot of people that have gone and done a short clinic, traveling clinic with Vic.
Yeah.
But Chris Martin, his brother David Martin played at Stanford, but Chris Martin, he won the last match out for them to win the NCAAs. He had a two-handed backhand, but at that time, I have to stop and think for a minute. Amir Delic, Phil Stolt, Michael Calkins, Brian Wilson, Ryler DeHart, who grew up in our program. When he was a freshman, he won 30 matches, but he didn't play, I think, the quarters, the semis, and the finals of the NCAAs. He was number 7. But they, all but Chris Martin's 6 out of the 7 players had one-handed backhands. That was just in 2003.
Yeah.
With the grip on the backhand side, we talk about Vic Braden the resource, and Vic Braden the man. When he had his TV show, Tennis for the Future, it was the same name as his book, his first book in 1977. He would just simply say to his audience, backhand is 1, serve is 2, and the forehand is 3. Just numbering the panels, right-hander to the right, lefties to left is 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
But if it's in his book as well, that the backhand is on the right side of number 1 for a right-hander.
Yeah, that knuckle rides that right side.
Yeah, the ridge. And with a Bradenism. There's no such thing as a perfect grip, just a grip with the least amount of adjustment.
And we're back. That was a review of the backhand. Now on to the overhead. This clip is from episode number 21.
Well, let's get going on the overhead.
All right.
With what I did is I wrote down 40 points. I remember the late, great Vic Braden saying many times, and the number could have been 30, 40, 50. But
I have 172 points, but we'll go through your 40.
Yeah.
Just kidding, listeners.
With having 40 points,
Yep.
sharing 40 points with 40 coaches, and they interpret the 40 points, the 40 coaches, 40 points, 40 different ways, and then do the math.
Yeah.
We hope we're going to keep plugging away that we're not confusing anybody. But let's start with just how it's defined: the smash, the slam, the put away.
If there's a home run in tennis, would you consider the overhead a home run?
It is looked upon as a spectacular.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The audience, someone can miss a routine forehand, like an easy forehand, no response.
Yeah.
And when the overhead is missed, it's like the 4th of July from the audience.
The player too, because I guess it's such a seemingly easy shot, you miss it, and it can do devastating things to your psyche, to your confidence.
Tennis teaching: scratch the back, point the finger as you shuffle back.
Sounds good.
For years I would say, this is before GPS, that you would watch the women at a country club, and typical country club lesson, and as you'd see them pointing like it was duck season, scratching the back, putting the arm in a really tight position, and when they take the shuffle step, they take one step and they end in the same spot. But the men, to pick on the men, they won't even take lessons. So it's like when a guy's driving a car years ago and he gets lost, he won't stop and ask anybody.
Right.
But a gal will stop and ask for directions.
No, but you still see the point. I mean, I see that in videos where people are
for sure
taught to point, or they're really doing a good job making the ball feel insecure.
Actually, with Dennis Vandermeer's logo, it's still a PTR's logo. And when you look at it, you just recognize tennis. So it's a positive from a marketing standpoint.
Right.
But with the left arm up, the left arm does go up, but it's a secondary movement. The primary movement, it will go through a lot of positives with the left hand. But you can have kids move back and they just try to catch the ball with their left hand. So you can use that as a drill. So I don't think you need to get hung up and go, oh, that's a myth, you don't point. The left arm does go up, but you can actually teach drills within that left arm being up. The left arm, helps you stay tall, stay sideways. Left arm, you decelerate the left side, helps you accelerate the right.
Yeah.
And I think where people are most confused on the overhead is when they first start playing, they think they can hit down and swing straight ahead.
I think the whole thing with the left hand going up like that early is that you don't turn the body. So you want to coil the body just like you would for a serve and any kind of throwing motion. And that's the big thing. So
so
early, you don't turn. And so, we could get into this now. We talk about using the left hand. Vic used to talk a lot about the left elbow, Vic Braden. Point, if you're right-handed, you point the left elbow at the ball first, and that gets you to turn your shoulders, or you use the left hand on the throat of the racket, and that will also have your elbow pointing to the ball. So they both do the same thing, but that'll get you to coil first, and then you can go up with the left arm.
Where we're hanging out in Orlando, Florida, today was a little chilly day. Had a young guy come in from Canada, and I go, it's cold today. The guy looked at me like I was crazy.
Like, what?
But Andy was out there, beautiful day. He had a couple baseball gloves.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to ask Andy, was that the first time the kid ever put on a baseball glove?
Yeah.
And many times it is.
Oh, yeah.
And even kids have been playing, we have some kids that are playing, 12-0 UTR tennis, and they don't have, when they throw a ball, they're not palm down.
I think it was 3 for 3.
3 for 3 today. Then when they even hang on to the baseball, or they're throwing a baseball, they're throwing a tennis ball. That's a problem. They don't use the thumb and the two forefingers.
Yeah, they haven't seen the natural.
They grab it like it's a shot put.
Yeah.
Les Stoffen, we talked about Les on this, the trophy look when we talked about the serve.
Yeah.
Had the best serve in the 30s. I remember teaching tennis with his son at the Vic Braden Tennis College. On the U.S. Open grounds, the statue, it's just there, scratch and point. It was a sculptor. It was a sculptor who liked the line of the arms where the elbow's down and the left arm's way up. Yeah. when you think about the trophy look was also used for the high school quarterback. You know, remember Roman Gabriel? Remember Roman Gabriel, Los Angeles Rams?
I do not.
You'd have the elbow pointing down, and it was no shoulder rotation. It was pointing straight to the sky.
Yeah, you don't want to have the elbow way, way down there.
One thing, obviously, you have to talk about the lob when you think of the overhead. The lob it's an optical illusion. I always use the analogy of the airplane off in the distance. It looks like it's floating. And then if you're at a train station or you're curbside and the car goes by, it seems like the car and the train is going much faster than the airplane that's so far away. Yeah. But the lob's up there. It's distance, a greater distance than the ground stroke that's coming 3 to 6 feet over the net. Yeah. So people start to move back slow. But there's other reasons people move back slow. Is there's just that fear. Bill Cosby, I've read all of Bill's books. I don't talk too much about Bill anymore, but his tennis book was all photos and facial expressions. And when the lob went up, he said it was just, oh no, oh no.
You have the book in the library.
I do. Actually,
I've seen that. It's great. We should try to
digress.
Put some pictures up from that.
You know, I remember thinking about this, like, oh, okay, maybe I'll pursue that. It was just a fleeting moment, but I had a contact that said, if you want to do this, I'm pretty sure you can. And I said, what's that? He said, Bill Cosby travels with a teaching pro. Wherever he goes, he takes a teaching pro with him. He's made a little bit of money. And I said, I thought, oh, that'd be kind of cool. And they go, well, get kind of old, you know, hitting with a 4-0 minus player every day.
Yeah.
But it's, oh, yes. I mean, you just got to love overheads. You know, the psychologist starts to tell you, you love tiebreakers. You love tiebreakers. I love overheads. The ball it's not like a pea in the sky, a BB. It's as big as a beach ball, big as a basketball.
Go for it.
One thought on the overhead is the two shots that people choke on the most are the overhead and the serve because they have the most time. The other day, someone hit a great return of serve. This happens all the time. They just go out, and they're just totally relaxed, and then they just let the arm free fall.
Yeah.
And with overheads, you just know a teaching pro is feeding young player, old player balls in the lesson, the fishbowl, everything's perfect in the lesson. Mm-hmm. And they can hit overheads in the lesson. Mm-hmm. But you just know in the match, they can't hit the overhead.
Yeah.
Because the brain has two sets of motor programming. Now it's in match play, and they're usually not up there, but to pick up balls or shake hands. They're up at the net. They've got hit an overhead, and they just flub it.
Yeah, especially on an important point. You know, if it's break point, match point, set point, whatever. If you're playing against someone, it's a good idea to throw up a lob because chances are they're going to be thinking, this is it.
That's where Vic was mentioned in Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink.
Blink, yeah.
You know without knowing. Yeah, I just know they're going to miss the overhead.
Right.
The angle up. Why don't you talk a little bit about the angle up?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the lob. Ball's dropping from a higher spot faster, and so you have to hit up to counteract that dropping ball. I think it was physicist Pat Keating that would say, generally the lob's dropping at about a 45-degree angle on the lob, and that you had to hit up 8 degrees to counteract that. So that gets a little technical, but you got to, the end idea is you got to hit up on the overhead. You don't got to think that you're going to hit down unless you're right close to the net and you could hit down, but you got to think about hitting up and out on the overhead and not down.
We have all these audio tapes of Vic Braden, a theoretical physicist, Pat Keating, who's based in Detroit, His formula for the loop was 5.5 miles per hour times the square root of the height of the loop.
Right. The drop, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Polish that up.
No, that's it. 5.5 times the square. Actually, I sent someone an email today. I think it was Roberts in NorCal. Just like, yeah, well, here's the math.
But that's where people think that we're just giving them high-tech stuff, is that actually research and science are so far removed in tennis. But that's, Braden was certainly so connected with people who are really studying the game. And it's interesting that people are still teaching scratch your back, point, toss higher, more time, all the different myths.
Yeah, someone had mentioned, I put up today, some ideas for New Year's resolutions, and I put up Vic's book, Tennis 2000, and someone had commented, is Vic still relevant today? And I'm going, and I just put yes.
Yeah, physics is not a fad.
Yeah.
The problems that you find on the serve, you find over palm up.
Yep.
A kid puts the palm up because they can swing down. They think they can hit down because they see their target through the net. Mm-hmm. You're blind to every target. On the serve and overhead, throwing motion, you're not only blind to your target, you swing away from your target.
Yeah.
Like so on a volley, palm to your target, forehand side, and backhand knuckles to your target. Same thing, you don't have a tracking motion with your palm. Let the strings go towards the target. I mean, it's witchcraft if you're saying otherwise. No, your strings can go anywhere, point any way you want.
Well, there's a lot of witchcraft out there then.
Yeah.
Back to the present. That was Steve and Andy talking about the overhead. Now on to the one-handed underspin backhand, also known as the slice.
Underspin backhand, important skill. I've got notes. Let's go through a few notes.
Yeah.
We consider the one-hand underspin backhand as a basic shot. There's specialty shots and there's emergency shots. It's commonly referred to as a slice.
Yeah.
We stay away from the word slice because of people think of chipping, chopping, hitting downward. Like all strokes, we have to go through grip, swing, and body. When we start from the beginning stages, day number 1, it's first day of practice. Shadow swing.
Yeah.
You can drop hit a ball. Early child development classes. Kids under the age of 7. I think how Welby Van Horn used to have people, just, instead of a pivot, they just would stand sideways, feet together, so the body's sideways. Mm-hmm. The art of tossing a ball.
Yeah.
So you can actually just drop the ball for the student so it goes right to the contact point. So from the very beginning, even though a little kid is not going to be playing a one-handed underspin backhand, a one-handed underspin backhand approach shot.
Yeah.
But slow reps, lots of reps, play statue, hit, hold.
Yeah.
How you position your arms. So you really started right from the very beginning. The introduction, just like any backhand, when you turn, 3 things you do simultaneously. Turn your shoulders. You change your arm from bent to relatively straight. Not locked or hyperextended, but
right.
You definitely change the position of the arm.
Yeah.
From the forehand side to the backhand side. Then you change the grip. With the grip, no such thing as a perfect grip, just a grip with the least amount of adjustment. Again, fast, because we've gone through so many things, but it all comes back to every stroke. Mm-hmm. But the 8 panels of the racket, grips an octagon, turn the racket 8 times, 360 degrees. So every time you turn the racket 1 panel, it's 45 degrees. Base knuckle of the index finger and the heel pad are the reference points. Those 2 reference points form a straight line.
I was just going to say quickly, just if you're new listening to our podcast and you haven't heard that math before, so you just take the 360 and divide it by 8, you get 45. So every time you switch a panel, you get 45 degrees difference.
Yeah, actually going back to one of the early podcasts, it's just called tennis math. There's so much math involved, and if you truly want to teach tennis, it's like the great Vic Braden said, it's not an attitude problem that causes the engineering problem. Generally, it's the engineering problem that causes the attitude problem.
Exactly.
So grip of a lifetime. Certainly you can hit an underspin backhand with a forehand grip, which is number 3, a continental grip's number 2. But what would be most efficient, and we'll get into the contact point, is having the base knuckle on the right side for a right-hander, the top panel. That grip, again, no such thing as a perfect grip. That grip allows someone to play a low volley. It's interesting with somebody who hits a one-handed topspin backhand. They generally have 2 grips, one for the slice, if you will.
Yeah.
And one for topspin, but you're much better off having 1 grip. We'll go through a few examples on that. Why is a forehand slice not as prevalent, not as effective? When you hit a forehand, the shoulder housing hit trails, and you have to swing across your body. It's much more natural when you hit a backhand one-handed because you're swinging away from your body.
Yeah, it can't have as long a hitting zone.
Yeah.
I like Andre's line. You bring this up a lot, Andre Agassi's line, where if you're going to hit a forehand underspin or slice, you might as well just hit it into the stands. But I know there have been some players that hit that fading, and inside out, outside in, kind of fading.
1978, Pammy Shriver.
Fading underspin shot is what I was trying to say.
Coached by Don Candy, the Aussie. She had a slice forehand. When she was inducted into the Tennis Hall of Fame, she said, "I'm the only player they've let in who stands like a duck." So she did pick on herself a little bit, but in an emergency situation, fair enough, you should be able to.
No, you got to have all. You got to have all the shots.
Hit a slice forehand. It comes down to. I always tell a story about Federer, and he plays those unbelievable shots when he's so far off the court. But I was in Switzerland one time, and these young kids, I had some kids, and we were at some squash courts, and I'm saying, okay, let's hit some forehands and backhands in squash courts. The Swiss kids came in, and they played squash with a tennis racket and a tennis ball.
Yeah.
So I'd like to guess, and that's the way the Fed learned to hit those amazing shots.
Yeah.
The impact point, Ken Rosewall's famous underspin backhand. Racket face was tilted, a Braden project. I think it was never more than 7 degrees.
Yeah, 5-7 degrees.
Where most people think the racket face is open at a 45-degree angle.
Yeah.
The language for the slice, again, we film players, and when they come out, we say, okay, let's hit some one-hand underspin backhands, and they look at us sometimes like, what do you mean?
What?
Granted, they're a little bit nervous because people are watching them.
Yeah.
Cameras pointed at them. But we say, oh, no, just slice it. And they go, oh, okay.
Oh.
But some other language, chip it, slice it, knife it, zip it through.
I like that one. Zip it through.
But actually,
Or knife it a lot.
Actually, knife it. There's a time and place for that type of language. Say, for example, recently, just the other day, I was telling a player, you're just not moving through your half volley. Sometimes you can even, if you have time, you can even take 2 steps back and then start coming forward again. You make adjustment steps in every which way. And players do get to the point where they can vary. It's not always an underspin drive. They can vary the angle of the racket face.
Yeah.
Somebody's in the corner and they have to absorb the pace, float the ball back.
Yeah, short angles, drop shots.
Human eye, 24 frames related to camera. We're not capable of seeing the contact point. When someone really turns their shoulders, the racket face is open in the backswing. And then when they're done, the racket face is open after impact. So just logically, a common sense notion, the racket must be open at the impact point.
Yeah.
And that's a myth. The feel, why don't you talk a little bit about that, the time the ball's on the racket?
Yeah, so generally 3 to 5 milliseconds, depending on how tight you string your racket or whatnot, but 3 to 5 milliseconds, you've got your 3 to 6 milliseconds. But it takes 50 to 70 milliseconds just for the sensation that you've hit the ball to reach your brain. So by the time you've felt it, the ball is long gone. We say 7 to 11 feet away, or a time span of 70 milliseconds. So the aftershock is really just the feel.
Feel and aftershock, one and the same. So granted, teaching is an art and a science, but also another way to say that is you can teach by feel and you can teach by fact, but you definitely don't want to just go out there and wing it without facts. Miss and misunderstandings, again, over and over again, the angle of the racket face. When it's not really spin that keeps the ball low, it's not slice that keeps the ball low, it's really the trajectory that keeps the ball low.
Yeah, exactly.
When a teaching pro is hitting with a beginner, they start slicing the ball. So they take speed off the ball, float the ball, set the ball up for the player, but it's a trajectory that keeps the ball low.
Yeah.
Most swings, when we teach people, we film from 3 different angles. The swing for most players, it goes east and west. It goes in the direction of the baseline.
Yeah.
The path of the racket, path of the target, connected dots. The swing should really go in the direction of the single sideline.
I think that's, it's tough. I'm sure maybe we just get into this now, but if you can just get people to understand that the tennis court from the baseline is less than 20 degrees, or the angle that the racket face has to change to go from corner to corner is less than 20 degrees. And if you just would go, okay, and just show that, it would make no sense if you want to be consistent to hit the ball deep as well, but to have the racket going east to west. But the confusion is when you're watching the pros practice or warm up, especially warm up, where they're hitting the ball right at each other down the middle. And so they're playing balls in close to their body, and you see more of a side spin. It's not an underspin, it's more of a side spin. And then I'm sure we'll get into more with the grip. But a lot of pros, on not even continental, it's really a composite between a continental and an Eastern. Like Rafa's pretty much his knuckles on top, Eastern forehand. And so they really have to pull the racket in towards their body to get the racket face vertical. They can't extend way out, or else the racket face would just be wide open, without having to really adjust their wrist.
No, and that comes down to no such thing as right or wrong. It's efficient, inefficient.
Yeah, in match play, it's going to look somewhat different when they're in action, playing much further away from their body. And then if they're hitting an approach shot, you definitely want to have your racket carrying out, going forward, just so your center of gravity goes ahead. If you're going east to west, your center of gravity is going to pull back towards the center of the court, which is good if you're in a defensive situation. But the other thing that we get a lot, and I'm going to put some videos up this week on social media, is where we have people hit and hold and stay sideways. One thing, when you stop your body, the racket goes 1.5 times faster. So you want to stop the shoulders from rotating. You don't want to open up. So that's one thing. And then number two is that the longer you extend out, the higher the finish ends up going. So it goes high, low, high, a banana-shaped swing. So you slightly swing down, the racket face is no more than 10 degrees open. And then as you extend out, the racket's going to go back up again and makes that little mini archway. And so when people look at some of our videos, when we teach and we have players hit and hold on balance, so they're just working on the stroke, they're not showing recovery, and they have that archway, they're not used to seeing that. So they really they wonder what's going on, or they get confused. They think it's maybe a topspin shot.
And we're back again. The last stroke we will review is the return of serve. Let's take one last final listen to Steve and Andy.
Return of serve. I'll speed dial through some of these notes. Second shot of every point, it's only not if there's an ace. With today's equipment, you now hear that the return of serve is number one shot, because there's so many players with a great serve. Players with a great serve, there's three positives. They can hit an ace, service winner, or following a good serve, there's a short, weak return.
Yeah.
The return is the challenge to offset those three positives. Usually in pro tennis, the serve is the key shot. Not so much in junior tennis. The key shot is who hits short. So with the return, it's a matter of nullifying the three positives and neutralizing, at least starting the point on neutral.
Yeah.
If I were to say one thing, having a great return starts from the get-go. Day one of lessons. Next time you watch Novak Djokovic, study, observe how he gets ready. It appears the ready position is of utmost importance to him.
Actually, oftentimes we'll call the ready position the nerdy position. And he has the nerdy position. He's really organized.
The ready position, the position to be ready. I used to say that was the only thing that tennis teaching pros agreed upon.
No way.
But now we'll have to get into that. The Australian Open, top of the hour, being current, Serena beats Halep. Watch that. Everyone talks about how great Serena's serve is. Her attitude on the return is the same, aggression.
Yeah.
Richard Williams was sly like a fox. 15 months between the two sisters. Venus made her mark before the age of 10, played out in Compton, California. After that, both girls did not play junior tennis. They didn't play one tournament.
I saw you put that in there. I wonder what the age was, because I was, I think, 16. This was in Southern California, and there was a girl that trained with us at the Vic Braden Tennis College. She was Swedish, and her name was Kristina Triska. And she was number one in the tens, I think, in Southern California. And I watched her play Venus, and I didn't really know who Venus was at the time, but I just remember watching going, geez, that girl's ground strokes are good, But she was towering over this little blonde Kristina Triska, and she hammered her 0-1. And then I think shortly after that, they were on the cover of Sports Illustrated.
First time I was in tune with the Williams sisters, that they sent a video to Vic, which we have a copy of. But then I was the director of tennis at Seguzo Bassett, which is now Chris Ozerets. And Rick Macy at the time, he wanted to merge with Seguzo Bassett. So I spent a lot of time on the court with never coached him for a second. I remember, having Richard watch me make videos.
Yeah.
But I remember being introduced to Serena, shaking hands with, like I was meeting somebody from the NBA. Then he told me, I won't introduce you to Serena. She might bite your finger off.
I like the Vic tape where he goes, Richard says, you always say we'll be famous by Friday, but your tapes are so good. You know what? We got good by Tuesday.
But why I say it was just fly like a fox is they didn't play push ball tennis. They didn't,
Yeah.
I used to say that when they first came on the scene, they were making tennis like home run derby. They were teeing off on everything. Home run derbies in baseball were trying to knock the ball out of the park. But when the point's over, you have to ask yourself if you're playing aggressive percentage tennis. Let me say this. When I ran an academic program for tennis teachers, I used to staple 4 blank pieces of paper together, and it was a test. I just think back of all the different teachers I had. It's a tough class when you just go in and you just ask one question. But this is just a lab assignment, rainy day. Take the next 2 hours and then write information down on the return of serve. Now, we've all had English teachers that have told us write the outline first. But we all, I think, have written the paper as a kid and then went back and wrote the outline after you wrote the paper.
Here's what I wrote.
So I just put down a few points from the chapter, but in doing that, tell the coaches I've trained that they should be able to take each segment, each chapter, and then make it an encore or a classroom presentation.
Right.
Along those lines, I think parents should know, just consumer beware. We talk about training coaches with a 2-year degree program. Most programs don't have a training program at all. There's no orientation.
Yeah.
One thing I put down is position. Establish your territory. There's obviously singles and doubles, but bisect the potential angle of the return. We prefer to tell people to stay close, but then that gets into the next part, the basics.
Yeah.
By staying in close, generally, we tell people, okay, like a volley, return like a volley with an added follow through. Mm-hmm. And then once you get used to their pace, you've established a territory that you can stand in close, take the return. But then from there, you just turn like a volley, and then you just make the circular motion. The image, from an image standpoint, you're just taking the racket right around a beach ball. Mm-hmm. There's singles, there's doubles, there's different surfaces, playing different styles. I mean, you have to obviously make adjustments when you're playing against the lefty. But the starting position, you see people who stay back, like say Nadal stays so far back, Dominic Thiem, but they pretty much know that the person on the other side is not coming in.
Exactly.
Roger Federer, and the people that follow these podcasts, we've said many things from one podcast to the next because the return of serve is tied into every aspect of the game, basically. Yeah. So Roger said at Wimbledon, when we talked about stats, he knows that less than 2% of the time his opponents are going to come in.
Yeah. You can just chip it back.
The split step on the return of serve is actually different than when someone's coming into the net. Even though we teach people land on 2 feet, we know if someone's right-handed and they're going for forehand volley, they're going to land on their right foot, which is at a 45-degree angle. It's just so they can have that ground reaction force and push off. But the preceding steps, sometimes they're called pre-steps, rhythm steps. It's almost like a sprinter coming out of the blocks. You need small little steps. When we make videos, we count the steps, how many steps, even when they're hitting ground strokes. It's in slow motion. How many adjustment steps do they make? Mm-hmm. Sometimes people actually, you tell that, and you try to motivate people, and then sometimes what you do is you over-motivate the motivated, and then they're expending too much energy with their feet. The pros, it's a fact that they go on statistical cues. They're laser focused. They're looking at the toss, right before the contact point, and they make a move.
Oh, is it interesting? When I think about the return, where in Vic Braden's studies, Vic, who we talk about every week pretty much, but with the eye mark recorder that studied the eye, the pupil, and he was like, oh, this is going to be great. We can see where these people who are really great anticipators for the return, let's see where their eyes are focused. And the player would say, well, I focus on my opponent's hips, and get an early read. And then what he found is they're actually looking up in the trees. And that it actually was more of the statistical cues that they were going off of, and not the visual cues that people say.
Elias Stasi was looking at the cute girls on the court side. Basics, activate footwork. But the ready position, you can watch people now in the ready position. It's a pretty safe bet. The racket's not centered. They're hanging onto the racket with at least a semi-Western grip. So the racket face is pointed down. The racket's tilted off to the side.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty safe bet. They're going to stand way back. I think of Roger Federer versus Andy Roddick. Roddick had a faster serve. It came down to who would hit more aces. People would just say, well, Roger is such a great spot server. But because of the mechanics of most players, they have an extra movement when they turn. They don't have the racket centered. They don't have the racket organized. The ready position is the forehand volley. The ready position is the forehand volley, and it is the backswing for the forehand.
Yeah.
That what they do when they have a larger swing, they make up for it by taking more time. They stand further back.
Exactly.
So it's easier for the player to move the returner off court, hit aces.
Yeah, I just think that's where the advantage of an Eastern grip, where you can make that initial turn, your strings face forward to the oncoming ball, and then you can take that short, compact swing. There's a video that I have. It's Leighton Hewitt, and he's returning serve. It's a high-speed film that I have, and I'll never forget this because there's a return where he's stretched out a little bit wide, but he goes from his more extreme grip, and you see him switch to an Eastern, actually, to square the racket up and then bring it through. And I was like, wow, look at that. Why doesn't he just wait? It's just easier to switch to the forehand side than it is to go, towards the backhand than it is to go the other way. But
yeah, along the same lines, you think of Roger Federer making a unit turn for the forehand, and then Rafa Nadal. If it comes down to a drop shot, Roger has more disguise.
Yeah.
Because Rafa has to realign his grip.
Yeah.
Because he starts with, say, his grip closer to 4 and Roger's closer to 3.
Yeah.
I would say parents want options and opportunities for their children. You want options on the return of serve. So if you have the clean ready position, like Novak Djokovic, you turn, and I use it all the time. The late Bud Collins said Jimmy Connors had the great system for stealing the ace.
Yeah.
Turn like a wall to the ball.
All right, that was a quick review of all the strokes. Again, if you would like to listen to the full podcast on any or all the strokes, please look up the respective episode number anywhere where you listen or watch podcasts. Viewers, thanks for listening. We hope this was a good review of the solid fundamentals for your strokes. Have a great rest of your day. Adios, amigos.